referred to the House Committee. Council now becomes committee of the whole Council to continue the consideration of the Inland Revenue Amendment Tax Concessions Bill 2019. The committee will continue to the joint debate on the clauses and amendments, including the amendment to the long title. Members may refer to the appendix to the script for the debate and voting arrangements for the bill. I remind members that the committee will debate the amendments, including the long title, so please do not deviate from the scope of the debate. Does any member wish to speak? Dr. Low Wai Kwok. Chairman. We are at the committee stage of the Inland Revenue Amendment Tax Concessions Bill 2019. We are to debate clauses 1 to 5 and the 2 CSAs moved by the government. And clauses 1 to 5 serve to amend the long title, and the other amendment serves to amend clause 5 to increase the prescribed percentage for tax deductions of salaries tax, profits tax, and tax under personal assessment for the year of assessment 2018 to 19 from 75 to 100%, while the ceiling will be retained at $20,000 per case. And this is to implement the second round of sweeteners implemented in August. The amendments are technical in nature, and amendment of clause 5 is to expedite the implementation of the measure, and I believe the public would not object to these amendments. Some people might feel that the measures were inadequate and the implementation was too slow. And in December last year, the BPA met the financial secretary. As for the proposals on the 2019 to 20 budget, we suggested that the basic allowance, tax allowance, be increased to 150,000, and the number of tax bands be increased, and the deductions should be increased to $35,000 to alleviate the burden on employees and the grassroots. And we are disappointed that the ceiling for tax deduction remains $20,000. Many industries have been affected recently, and the middle class and grassroots are facing a deep plight, and the alleviation measures should be reinforced. In the second round of measures announced by the government, subsidy on electricity tariff amounting to $2,000, as well as PRH rental concessions were included for businesses, and 27 government fees would be waived for 12 months for SMEs, and the SME loan guarantee scheme would be reinforced, and the BUD fund would receive an extra injection, and the SME marketing fund would also receive an injection, and this can help ease the burden on SMEs in the short term. For the second round of measures, they would amount to $19.1 billion. Notwithstanding the tax deductions, the PRH rental waiver and BUD fund injection are subject to approval from the Finance Committee of LegCo. That way, after that, the government can implement the measures. For the political turmoil stemming from the extradition law amendment, it has lasted 4 months, and many sectors and businesses have been affected, and many businesses were plunged into a deep plight. before the resumption of the second reading of the bill in October, a third round of measures was announced by the government to support sectors affected by the violent turmoil, including the transportation sector. And starting from December, for government car parks or parking lots or government venues, there would be a 6-month waiver. The Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development announced a subsidy for travel agencies. For every inbound visitor, the agency can receive $120. For outbound visitors, they would receive $100 each, subject to a total cap of $60,000. This would encourage travel agencies to solicit more visitors. It will come into force in November, and it will last 4 months. The maximum commitment is $100 million, involving 850,000 visitors. And the government indicated that the third round of measures would amount to about $2.5 billion. And the first amendment serves to increase the prescribed percentage for tax reduction for 3 types of taxes from $75,000 to $100,000, but the impact of alleviation is limited. Chairman, since July, together with my colleagues at the BPA, I have met the Financial Secretary and the Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development in order to reflect the plight of the trade. We have proposed various alleviation measures. We are happy to see that the alleviation measures have been enhanced after adopting some of our proposals. For the 3 rounds of alleviation measures, they amount to a total of $64 billion. And compared with the consolidated revenue of $68 billion for the year, the alleviation measures are significant. The impacts on the businesses might actually be more serious than expected by the government. For the tourism sector, inbound visitors have faced deeper declines since August. For October, the decline was 50%. For the accommodation sector, occupation rates dropped 28%, and it was the worst since SARS. For the retail sector, retail volume, the drop in volume expanded to 25.3%. For the catering industry, since June, the drop in business amounted to 35%. About 300 restaurants closed down. Based on figures from the first 9 months of the year, the number of bankruptcy petitions amounted to 5,940 cases, and the number of bankruptcy orders also reached 5,600. As for the bankruptcy petitions submitted, 302, and winding up orders, 187 cases. We expect more people to be out of a job in the short term. The turmoil is yet to die down, and consumption sentiments are low. According to a recent study, due to recent sentiments, more than half the respondents changed their plans to get married. 6,000 couples would delay their weddings, and about 500 couples have canceled their plans to get married. As for Chinese restaurants that relied on weddings, they will suffer steep losses. The catering industry pointed out that there's a lack of business. Even with the rental waivers, the situation would not improve. At the Economic Development Panel meeting earlier, I pointed out to Mr. Edward Yao that consumption coupons should be given out to the public and tourists in order to help the catering industry overcome the current difficulties. These government proposed amendments are worth supporting because, like I said in the resumption of the second debate, Hong Kong is facing many different challenges. We face internal turmoil as well as a gloomy global sentiment, and we face different risks. The financial secretary pointed out that after a negative growth in Q2, the decline is expected to continue into Q3, and we have entered a technical recession. If the situation does not improve, we would not be able to meet the 0 to 1% GDP growth forecast for the year, and we might even see a negative growth. The BPA is concerned about our economic position. We urge the government to listen to the trades and make the best use of their fiscal surplus to roll out different alleviation measures for businesses and the public. Unfortunately, no one can look into the future, or no one would know how many of these alleviation measures are needed from the government. And with declining revenue, the government might have to continue with these sweeteners. Are we going to enter a vicious cycle? Even though we are sitting on healthy reserves, one day it might be exhausted. Chairman, most people would agree that despite the alleviation measures rolled out by the government, they could only address the short-term pains for the trades. If the radical people's violent acts do not stop, then the alleviation measures would not be effective, and they might not even be able to address the short-term problems. To tackle the root of the problem, this is a priority for the government. Effective measures must be taken out as soon as possible. There must be stern enforcement in order to restore order to the society, and on this basis we can improve the economy and improve livelihood.
All sectors of society, including members of this council, should stop political bickering and do something really concrete for the sake of people's livelihood. With these remarks, I support the passage of the Inland Revenue Amendment Tax Concessions Bill 2019 and the CSAs by the administration. May I remind members once again that at the committee stage we should focus on the amendments. There is no need to labor on the pros and cons, merits and demerits of the bill. Mr. Jeffrey Lam. Thank you. In August, the administration announced the first round of relief measures, and the amendments here are part of the measures announced. And then the tax concessions will be increased to from 75% to 100% of the tax bill, subject to a ceiling of $20,000 per case. The only time we had a similar concession was in 2009. It was after the financial tsunami, and there was also the human swine flu. And then there were a number of measures to support enterprises and to protect jobs. and then tax concessions were raised from 50% to 100%, and the ceiling was adjusted from $6,000 to $8,000. There were challenges from outside Hong Kong back then. For this year, we have both challenges from within and without Hong Kong. The confidence of Hong Kong people and enterprises is at an all-time low. We are now in deep waters. We need to support enterprises and safeguard jobs. The PBA has proposed a number of measures to the administration, including the SME Guarantee Financing Fund. There should be 80% guarantee, and in the coming 6 months, enterprises should be allowed to repay the dividends or interest only and not the capital. And banks are encouraged to provide loans to SMEs more generously to help the cash flow of SMEs so that they can have better liquidity and the burden can be lessened. Concerning this 100% tax concession, of course, it is a good thing. But I'm of the view that the ceiling of $20,000 per case is hardly sufficient. Last year, the ceiling was fixed at $30,000. Given that situation is that bad this year, the ceiling should be raised. President, can you check who is causing trouble here? Mr. Jeffrey Lam, please continue. We are talking about a very serious subject. We all want to come up with measures to help SMEs to tide over the difficult period. And yet, there are some who are so childish as to play tricks here. They're not aware of the dire situation, and they are now adding oil. They're adding fuel to fire. The situation now is even worse than what it was in 2009 and worse than what it was last year. Last year, the concession ceiling was $30,000. Now it's been cut to $20,000. That is highly sufficient. In fact, it should be $30,000 or even $40,000 to be more effective in helping SMEs. Our taxation system is simple and direct. We have a low tax regime. Since we are providing a waiver, then we should provide 100% concession to save administrative costs. The government likes to talk about a staff shortage. Then I think it would be more effective if we just waive all the taxes, and then that can save manpower on the part of the Inland Revenue Department and can provide more relief to enterprises. Now, for enterprises that are paying $5,000 less, it is just a drop in the ocean. Of course, it is better than nothing, but for a working family, and other $5,000 is rather effective help, because some enterprises are already finding it hard to survive. Some SME proprietors have mortgaged everything they have, and some of them have even wound it up, and very soon there will be unemployment. In his PC to announce the relief measures in August, the FS gave us a lot of data involving goods output, export, throughput, and also retail turnover. There was a marked reduction in all these figures, and the number of visitors to Hong Kong has also dropped substantially. While society unrest remains, some politicians are still adding oil to fuel to fire. many enterprises have been hard hit, and many of them can not bear with it anymore. And then the situation is getting more complex, and SMEs are all talk about how to cut costs. Some companies are giving no pay leave to their staff, and some have to downsize. They have no choice but to lay off staff. A friend of mine doesn't want his staff to lose their rice bowls, and he's making losses every month, and some have to mortgage the properties to take out loans from from banks, and they can only get 34%, or they can only mortgage 30 or 40% of the properties. Mr. Jeffrey MP Kirk, can you please focus on the amendments? Please tell us whether you support them or not. Of course I do, but it is important as well as to how the money saved can be used to help SMEs. Although I haven't said I support the CSA yet, I have just got a few more sentences before I finish. Yes, mortgage is very tight. SMEs can only mortgage 30 to 40% of the value of the properties. Of course, it's better than nothing. But if they sell their properties because it's still during the SSD validity period, that is very difficult for them. Turning back to the tax concessions, the amount should be greater than proposed, and all sectors of the community should make suggestions to the government. We propose a cash subsidy to travel agents, hoping that we can help companies. The longer a company can stay viable, the longer its staff can keep its jobs, hoping that the unrest can be over sooner and then business can return. We understand that $100 or $150 in cash subsidy may not be able to help all travel agencies to solve their problem. If everything taken together, tax concessions, SME financing guarantee scheme, reduction in rent, a cash subsidy, so on and so forth, this is a multi-pronged approach. We're doing our utmost to help the greatest number of companies in the community. We say that, well, to enjoy tax concessions, you have to make enough to pay tax first. We want everyone to live an abundant and peaceful life in Hong Kong. The relief measures can only keep us afloat. To revive the situation, the political issues and political turmoil must be addressed so that we can restore calm to society. We've lived in Hong Kong for decades. We've spent the most part of our lives in Hong Kong. We want a stable life. We never imagined that things could be like that. Some people say that if I burn, you burn with me. And some people are deliberately doing that, and they encourage people to use riots to damage Hong Kong, to wreak havoc, and to damage our lives. They are damaging public facilities and shops, causing more people to become unemployed, so that the community will become worse. This is their so-called high-sounding ideals. I think they should search their souls and ask themselves what they are looking for. I don't want them to continue in this way. I support the amendments. Thank you. Mr. Leung Chi-Chung. Thank you, President. Now we are examining the committee stage amendments of the bills of the Inland Revenue Amendment Tax Concessions Bill 2019. There are 5 clauses in this bill, including the long title. We'll spend more than a dozen of hours on this. At first, I gave my full support to the bill, and having heard the remarks of members, I have some new ideas, and I'd like to share with you my new thinking. As we all know, the bill provides one-off tax concessions to all taxpayers up to 75% of their salaries tax, tax under personal assessment, and profits tax for the assessment year 2018-2019. The FS subsequently raised the ceiling raised the percentage from 75% to 100%, subject to a ceiling of $20,000 per case. I've done some research, and I came to realize that this measure, compared with the relief measures in 2017-2018, the ceiling for a tax concession of profits tax was $30,000, and for the marginal tax rate, the ceiling was raised from $45,000 to $50,000. This adjustment cost the government $22.6 billion in tax money. Now, if the same concessions are applied in the salaries tax and tax under personal assessment and profits tax for the assessment year 2018-2019. Now, if the reduction is by 75%, subject to a ceiling of $20,000, that would mean $17.8 billion forgone, or $18.9 billion forgone. Last year, we gave tax concessions, but this year, the ceiling of concession is lower than that of last year. The government will only get a few $1 billion more this year, and that is very affordable to the government. I'd like to know the reason why the FS has decided to do this. And I'm of the view that the support to the middle class in the budget is very limited. In previous policy addresses and budgets, there were insufficient support was given to the middle class and to relieve the burden on the public.
Apart from the tax relief, nothing much else is offered to help the middle class. So is this relief measure good enough? Well, I gave my support last week, but having heard other members, I have come to a different view. Well, actually, for the middle class, the major expenditure for them is the mortgage for their homes, mortgage payment of their homes, education for their children, and supporting their elderly parents, and also tax payments. So the middle class shoulder the heaviest burden when it comes to distribution of wealth and the relative financial burden is the highest. So the middle class has been hurt most. And that's why in the recent unrest, the middle class seem to be at the very forefront of the protests. That's the fruit of government neglect of the middle class well-being. And now, if we still keep the ceiling at $20,000, wouldn't it be rather insufficient for the middle class? In the past year, we have seen an inflation rate of 2.6%. But what about income for the middle class? If we refer to remuneration of government officials, let's look at D2, civil servants, directorate officers, and make a comparison. In 1997, the D2 pay point was 111,000. Last year, the same pay point would give you $171,200. So annually speaking, there's been an increase of 2,900. And the inflation of prices is just 2.6%. And the number one expenditure incurred by a middle-class family is the mortgage payment. What about the rate of increase in mortgage payment? If we look at the per square foot property prices of major estates, let's look at City One Sha Tin. In 2008, the per square foot price was $4,823, but last year it's $17,770 per square foot, an increase of 229%. And if we look at Cornhill Garden, 2008, $7,193 per square foot, and 2018 is more than 13,000. So there's an increase of 156%. So property prices have been rising much more rapidly than income. So the middle class and ordinary people have been facing a lot of financial pressure, but the government is providing disproportionately low support to them. And therefore, among different population sectors, the middle class is most unhappy at the work of the government. And now this time, in the policy address, in the budget, you give them some sweeteners. What are there to offer to the middle class? So that's why we don't see any immediate end to the unrest. I think the figures can tell the picture. I hope the government will pay attention to this situation. We have spent more than 10 hours in this debate. Many members have mentioned the tax base. But if it's not within the ambit of this bill, if the government do nothing if the government is reluctant to do anything about the tax base, governance in the future will be made more difficult. I hope the FS and other policy makers in the government will look at the ways and means to improve our tax system and our tax base. With these remarks, well, I would like to say that I will support the amendments, although they are not everything I want. Mr. Houghton Chow. Chairman, in this part of our debate, we'll be speaking on the CSAs to the Inland Revenue Amendment Tax Concessions Bill 2019, and that is the percentage of 75% will be raised from to 100%. 1.43 million taxpayers or businesses will be benefited, and taxpayers will save additionally $1.84 billion in tax money. Chairman, in the community, some people think that although the percentage has been raised from 75% to 100%, the same ceiling is kept. That is still $20,000. So the actual benefits for taxpayers is not as much as expected. Yes, the enhancement is not much. It may be considered a small adjustment for sandwich class, working people and their families. Compared with the original measure and the current proposal, they may get a few $1,000 more in the reduction. For the sandwich class, well, actually it's extra money in their pocket, so it's going to help somewhat. But I have to repeat this point, that is just a small amount. It's just a drop in the ocean. And some members have referred to tax relief measures introduced in previous years. It used to be $30,000 as the ceiling, and now this year the environment is even worse. And why are we only getting a ceiling of $20,000? Well, the situation in Hong Kong is very worrying. If in the economic field, apart from the trade conflict between China and the U.S., things are rather murky, and there are a lot of uncertainties, and the unrest and violence in Hong Kong look like it would be continued, and the retail and catering trades have been severely affected. If you go out, you see that the streets are more or less deserted. People are reluctant to go out during the weekend, and the retail sector and the catering industry are among the most adversely affected. They have been asking what relief measures will the government introduce to help them, because very easily these shops, these businesses would go under, and then there would be laying off of their employees. And we have seen the unemployment rate going up to 2.9%, the first time in many years that we saw an upward adjustment. But unemployment rate can go up very rapidly when things get worse. The SAR government should understand that we are now just seeing an economic downturn, and grassrooters and workers would easily lose their jobs. And then the government should consider whether the tax relief measures can really help our people. As I've said, the ceiling used to be $30,000, and now it's been downward adjusted to $20,000. And given the very worrying environment, I would say that this really bucks the trend and is actually doing something in the opposite direction. Would the tax relief really help our people, especially the grassrooters and the sandwich class? In this regard, I would like to say that there have been calls in the community that when we are capable, financially speaking, to give handouts, we should consider this. I'm not talking about a recurrent measure of handing people sweeteners. I'm talking about when we have a healthy surplus. We should do this. And the government should learn from past experience in handling handouts. In 2011, the then FS gave everyone $6,000. And in the previous year, the current FS promised us that everyone will be given the $4,000 after passing a means test. But it turns out that the government had to spend a lot of time to introduce a very complicated administrative system to vet the applications. We spend hundreds of millions of dollars in the student finance office to handle the vetting of applications. As a result, in this exercise, everyone is unhappy, although they would receive $4,000 in due course. And still, up to this point, not all applications have been processed. So whenever we want to give our people cash or handout, I hope the government would pay attention to past experience. If you cannot remove the red tape and the administrative system is so complicated, you are just making people very dissatisfied, and they wouldn't have no idea in what stage their applications are in. If that's the case, we might as well give everyone the same handout without going through a very complicated vetting system. For example, we might as well spend the hundreds of millions of dollars spent in vetting for something better.
主席，
Chairman, in terms of the tax reduction or tax rebate arrangements, some members have already mentioned this, but at this very worrying time, alleviation measures can ease the burden on SMEs and the public, and these are much needed. And the government has taken out measures to help SMEs, for example, by deploying or reinforcing guarantee schemes, and the government should take the lead in reducing rents for quasi-governmental properties. For example, those under the airport authority, should they offer rent concessions? Mr. Odenchao, please come back to the theme. Yes, I'm about to get there. This is one way to ease the burden for everyone, but I wish to point out that apart from tax rebates and financial incentives, we need the government to be committed in curbing the violence. So this requires efforts from more than just one department. I hope all government departments would work together in curbing the violence. All departments should coordinate among each other to curb violence instead of just relying on a single enforcement agency, that is the Hong Kong police. I hope other government departments should cooperate and offer support in order to restore peace and order in our community. Chairman, in the aftermath of all the violence in the last 4 months, prosecutions should be made. We should refer to the unrest of the UK in recent years. Their courts expedited the proceedings by offering 24-hour service. That is how they can come up with decisions as soon as possible. For those found guilty, they should be punished. The prosecutions have proceeded, but they are way too slow. And we do not know how the courts schedule the timetables. We should take a leaf out of UK's book. We should set up 24-hour courts to expedite the processing of these cases, and this is how we can restore order. Chairman, we should not just be talking about increasing the tax reduction percentage from 75 to 100%. More importantly, the government should be united and committed in curbing the violence in order to restore order and peace to Hong Kong, so that Hong Kong people would have the right to go out again. And that way, businesses will be free to operate instead of having to live under fear every single day just because they might embrace a certain stance, and as such they might be vandalized and their guests could be subject to nuisance. So the government should be committed in returning freedom for the public and our businesses. Hong Kong faces a lot of issues now. The government must be committed in curbing the violence. This is the only way we can restore stability to our economy. Apart from the tax rebates, we propose other measures to the government in the past. So for the officials here, I hope you have heard what we said. For example, rental concessions at government properties. You should also support SMEs in applying for loans. And this is what we expect of the government. Thank you. Mr. Chen Kim-po. Thank you, Chairman. The amendments proposed by the government seeks to increase the prescribed percentage for tax deduction of salaries tax, profits tax, and tax under personal assessment from 75 to 100%, and the ceiling remains at $20,000 per case. And this was among the measures announced by the Financial Secretary in August, and this would benefit 1.43 million individuals and enterprises, amounting to $4.8 billion. I'm fully supportive of the measure. Hong Kong is in a mess, and many people and SMEs are suffering. But this measure would only benefit a small percentage of people. To allow more businesses and the middle class to benefit, the government should be brave in instituting a tax reform. The government proposes to increase the deductions from 75 to 100%, but the ceiling has not been raised from $20,000, and as such, the benefits to many people are limited. Many people point out that for those making more than $400,000 per year, if they do not enjoy other allowances, increasing the percentage of reduction from 75 to 100% would mean nothing to them. For those making $500,000 with children, again, they would not benefit from the increase in percentage of reduction. So the middle class cannot benefit. For many low-income individuals, they are paying less than $20,000 of tax. So again, they don't benefit from this adjustment. So many members have said that the ceiling of reduction is too low. A number of pro-Beijing Comm members today offered very useful recommendations to the government. So I urge the government to study these proposals. I propose increasing the ceiling of deduction from $20,000 to $30,000 or more, so that the middle and high earners can benefit, and the SME owners as well. But this requires a bigger commitment from the government. In the past year, we once adopted a $30,000 ceiling, so the government should explore whether this is again possible. So for some members ask whether the remaining portion of the $20,000 ceiling can be carried forward to the next year. I think you should be generous, and you can make reference to the healthcare voucher scheme. So perhaps the government can do the math and see if this is possible. Like I said in the second reading debate, the government should be bold in reforming our tax regime. For those making, for the middle class making less than $50,000, under $50,000 per month, they should not have to pay taxes. I did not carry out any detailed study, but I wanted to prompt the government to think. In 2016 to 17, for those, there were 1.35 million people making less than $500,000, but they are so if you waive taxes for those making less than $600,000 per year, then government tax revenue would only drop by 8.6%. So this would be a very good move. The government has proposed tax concessions every year, and even the high earners would enjoy a $20,000 reduction. I think these people should be able to enjoy the $20,000 reduction. But a fairer approach is that for those making more than 1 or 2 million per year, the tax rate should be 15.5 or 16% instead of 15%. For these high earners, they don't really mind. Of course, I don't represent them. I'm only speaking for myself. But I believe many people would think that if more people can benefit from the tax regime, then it would only benefit the overall sentiments. So this is certainly worth doing. If those making more than $1 million per year cannot enjoy the $20,000 deduction, the government can save more than $3 billion. So even if you offer tax waivers to a particular segment, you would only have to pay another billion or so. So it all comes down to commitment by the government. The government should not think that they, should not dodge from their responsibility. Some people object to these measures due to administrative difficulties. Some secretaries told me that innovative measures would often face opposition due to bureaucracy. From the current social movement, we can see that a bureaucratic thinking will lead to many complaints. And if the chaos continues, the officials might be out of a job. The government should eliminate the officials who fail to get things done. This is something that should be done. If this culture does not change, Hong Kong will continue to erode and we will have no future. Some people felt that this would lead to a narrowing of the tax base, but like I said, the impact on revenue is only 8.6%. And you can ask them to start paying taxes again in the future anytime if necessary. I believe Hong Kong people are willing to share the burden, so there's no concern at all. In 2013, the government set up the long-term financial planning group to study the aging population and corresponding plans. The financial secretary has decided to transfer the financial task force set up in 2017 to the financial secretary. I hope he can tackle the financial impacts of our aging population and paint a brighter future for Hong Kong. Economic development should be the priority, and tax concessions should be the way to go. This would attract international entrepreneurs, and we should promote diverse economic development. In order to rebuild our edge, we must create wealth for Hong Kong. And this would be more effective than just changing the tax reduction percentages. My office received a lot of inquiries on when the government's alleviation measures would be rolled out. They are eager to see that happen. So the Inland Revenue Amendment Tax Concessions Bill 2019 we are looking at right now is one of those, and other measures including those on electricity tariff, PLH rental concessions. I receive letters every day hoping that these be passed at the Finance Committee. And the public hopes that they can benefit from these measures as soon as possible.
I frequently hear from the opposition camp, even today, they said that our responsibility is to monitor the government. I cannot agree more. So I am going to support them. I will greatly increase the meeting time for FC, and so that they can monitor the government. I'm going to consult them on additional slots of FC, and they must do what they claim that they're going to do. Because in the past only one or two of them turned up. I hope that they can be present at all FC meetings. I really like meetings. I don't mind convening meetings every day. So they must walk the talk. Please come when I convene meetings. In fact, I am more than happy to disclose the truth to the public. Although none of them are here, not a single one. I don't know why. I hope that they can really walk the talk, and please do not pay lip service to what they are saying, and we can have more FC meetings to monitor the government, and then we can expedite the vetting of government proposals. They must practice what they preach. You won't believe that so many people have called me to ask when civil service pay could be approved and when projects can commence works. Lastly, we should stop the violence as soon as possible. However, this is time for conciliation as well. I hope we will not just pay lip service to all these. It's pointless to have relief measures only because public resources can be exhausted very soon, as said by the government. Very soon we will go into technical recession, where we see a spate of businesses closing down and people losing their jobs, and people's livelihood will be affected. Many people describe the current times as even worse than the SARS period. Yes, it's really worse because during the SARS outbreak, you won't be beaten up for holding different views. And then during the SARS outbreak, we were very united. We tried to think of measures to help Hong Kong. I hope this time we can set aside our divisions. Is detrimental to continue with this riots. Well, even for those people who want to burn with the rest of us, you have to bear in mind that even your family members will be affected. You shouldn't be that selfish. And even if you go to legislators and ask for help, they will tell you, sorry, I can't help you, because they might have already had arrangements overseas. You know, it is really very sad to be jailed. Some can tell you that when they were in detention center, they couldn't use their mobile phones, they could not use the internet. They should understand that we're really helping them and they should not go astray. Now, if we continue this way, Hong Kong will be in a disaster. So please think of ways to really help Hong Kong people. The meeting is adjourned, and then we resume at 5:20.